Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Peyton Marshall. Peyton has extensive leadership experience in the healthcare and IT sectors, and as CEO of LeveragePoint, he works with some of the world's leading B2B companies to quantify and communicate the value they provide to their customers. So with that, Peyton, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. I think we're all here because we're actively involved in customer value management, but there are a lot of questions we can ask. In many organizations, customer value management gets its start by looking at the buyer. Where do your customers focus? On price or on value? There's a related commercial strategy question, which is how should your teams engage with customers? Where the best answers are empathetic, by understanding customer problems and by speaking to customer outcomes, which leads back to customer value. The best B2B commercial teams try to orient customers' decisions toward the value they deliver. But what is value? Warren Buffett has a simple answer. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. In practice, the key players are pretty clear and price is usually straightforward as well. But value can be subtle. It's about connecting your offering to customer outcomes. There are always a few things to think about when it comes to customer value. First, value is relative. It's always measured versus a reference point, a comparator or a competitor, status quo or a competing alternative. So the question is, what alternative is the customer considering? Next, value comes from the entire offering. Product, services, brand. It includes supply chains, support, revenues, intangible value. And of course, there's a bottom line. To be a customer, a buying customer, value needs to be greater than price in some qualitative or quantitative sense. Otherwise, why buy? Value management is about looking at customers through a value lens. And there are two important objectives to value management that we see. The first is to make better decisions. Customer segmentation can come very directly from an understanding of value. If you've understood customers better, you can think about better offer design, value-based pricing, as well as good value-oriented messages and communication. But once you've done the work of thinking about value, it's natural to improve execution. And what we find over and over is companies oriented towards value selling have faster sales cycles, higher margins, higher close rates, and more successful product launches. It's important as you understand value to be clear about your use case for customer value, and that ranges from new products to existing products and solutions. So we think of there being three decision-making use cases for value. Better product discipline, gated review processes, better product launch, positioning, pricing, offer design, and better existing product management. The use cases on the execution side then get to sales execution, quota-carrying, commission-earning reps, pre-sales execution, the customer-facing subject matter experts, whether they're product managers or solution consultants. And finally, relationship post-sale customer success. Value can be used for all these purposes, and it's important as we think about value to think about use cases. In light of all that, with that as a little bit of background, what we realized was that there are a lot of choices and approaches among LeveragePoint customers and others in how customer value management is implemented. And that set of questions includes everything from what is customer value, ranging from emotional, qualitative value to quantitative and financial. How do people use customer value in their commercial strategy? Is it value-based decision-making, value selling, or both? When does your organization use value? Is it defense? Is it offense? Is it for existing accounts? Is it for new accounts? What process and tools do you use? Manual, customer at a time versus automated and scalable? And finally, how does your organization act in deploying value? Is it a senior leadership top-down driven approach or bottoms up? So with all these questions, we really decided to poll the broad community by asking a number of them. We couldn't cover anything, but we think we came up with a reasonable a reasonable set for this year. And in looking at the answers, we're very pleased to be joined today by 3 leading practitioners of customer value management. So let's introduce our panel. First, Paolo Angeli is head of customer experience and customer value management at Borealis. He has extensive experience in pricing, sales, and marketing. With his background in specialty chemicals and manufacturing, he's been a leader over and over in driving organizational transformation. Welcome, Paolo.
Thank you, Peyton.
Next, Iacob Prebensen, Global Marketing Manager at Elkem. Iacob brings deep experience in value strategies and experience in a lot of direct customer interactions relating to value. With a background in oil and gas, we're grateful for his perspectives. Welcome, Iacob.
Thank you, Peyton.
Last and certainly not least, Todd Snelgrove, author, thought leader, founding partner at Experts in Value, a consultancy. Todd's experience ranges from manufacturing to high tech to services, where he's had hands-on operating roles driving major organizational transformations toward customer value management. Todd, great to have your insights.
Hi, Peyton.
Before we dive into results and discussion, let's understand a little bit more about the survey. Nick has done a lot of heavy lifting over the last 2 months. And Nick, by the way, is joining us first time ever from Kathmandu. So Nick, I wonder if you would please walk us through the survey process and some of the participants.
Great. Well, good morning, good evening, and in the case of me, but thank you, Peyton. And so before diving into the findings, I think it's worth briefly reviewing the demographics of the survey itself. So overall, there were 357 respondents over the 5 weeks the survey was open. We use a number of channels to promote the survey to our audience, including email, both direct and in our newsletter, social media, targeted one-to-one outreach, an in-person event, and our website. One really important thing to note is that the makeup of our audience is primarily B2B organizations, many of which have a strong focus on value. Looking through a job level, we were pleased to see a good mix of senior management, 40%, and if you count consultants, 50%, as well as 50% mid-management and contributors. Looking at job function next, we also yielded a good mix with 40% of folks with customer-facing roles, plus good participation from many across marketing, pricing, and product, a lot of whom have directly interact with customers. Breaking this down by industry next, we saw a good mix of verticals. Software high tech had 34%, 20% of respondents were from manufacturing and specialty chemicals, 18% in logistics, 24% in healthcare and med tech, all of which are innovative, differentiated business where value plays a natural role. Last but not least, we took a slice at org size. So we saw a third of respondents said they're from organizations that represented 500 million in annual revenue and up, and 2/3 below. One important caveat, though, is that we phrase the question in terms of org size, which may not tell us a whole lot about whether that particular organization is a part of a larger enterprise. So with that context, Peyton, I'll send it back your way.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you for reaching out to bring the value community to us here today. Now that we've met our participants, let's see how they rated themselves. This is the result of the final question, the value management self-assessment. And what's interesting as you look at that assessment is you see 52% of respondents said they were superior or outperforming, and less than 20% viewed themselves as behind their competitors. So a pretty high self-assessment. Interestingly, there's a big difference in self-assessment between senior management and those who are in the trenches. So if you look at directors and above, 68% believe that they are outperforming. That's the two blue bars. Whereas only 36% of contributors in mid-management share that view. Iacob, does management's confidence here surprise you?
I'm not surprised about the confidence, as I've been on both sides of these two columns. I do think there's some wishful thinking in all of this, but in my experience, the statement that they are outperforming or superior is somewhat overrated. If you really are outperforming your competitor, then congratulations, because then you know your customer pretty well, or competitors were very well. But what this result really shows is a clear difference between what they wish for and what is actually being done. And just because value-based management or pricing has been implemented, it doesn't mean that the entire organization has adopted the right mindset. Most of the time, upper management will look purely at financial results, and they don't necessarily see that what they could have been if they went all in with value-based management.
Okay. Yeah.
It could also show upper management lack of involvement in the entire process. What I would like to say is that upper management involvement in this is critical.
Interesting. Todd, if you look across the demographics and who participated, verticals, organizational roles, any surprises in that participation?
Todd, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, sir. I was just saying that, B2B makes sense, even though value management exists in the B2C world. I mean, it's just a different strategy and what you do with the calculators and the like. But I think that makes sense. So it's good to see the cross section that you've pulled together. And, back to the roles. I mean, the people in the trenches using the tools and the activities versus senior management. And my only comment to add there is sometimes we only want to tell the good stories going up. So management here, everything I hear is great. Not when we didn't use it or what we lost, or there's always another reason. It's never because of value we lost or lack of doing our job. We're salespeople. We're good at value, we think. So that's self-selection bias.
Paolo, let's return to the lower confidence expressed by those in the trenches. What does that tell you? Are there some good ways to get started building value confidence in an organization?
Yes, so first of all, I agree with the colleagues. It doesn't surprise me either. And my experience, of course, the closer you are to customers and issues and problems, the more difficult it is to have, like a shining picture in front of your eyes when you talk about these topics. And also maybe it's important to understand what we mean here with value and customer value management, value-based pricing. Sometimes we have the feeling that we are good at it, but how many of our companies have really spent time discussing about this topic with customers directly, even like bringing quantifications and agreeing with customers about the differential value proposition, rather than just simply, let's say, having internal exercise on the value proposition and considering that already has been good enough. So it's very interesting. It'll be very interesting to deep dive a little bit more on also on the understanding. And to your second question, Peyton, how do we create confidence? I mean, at least what I observe is the earlier you involve people in the field that eventually need to bring these topics to the customers, the better it is. And I know this sounds so obvious. We heard this so many times, but it's still a very common mistake, in my opinion. And if you don't make this mistake, you are already ahead of competition, if you think about it, because then you have champions since the beginning, and it should not be, marketing defines the value proposition and sales brings it to the market and to the customers. It should be really a joint team effort, in my opinion.
Great. Yeah. Champions, leadership, as Iacob said. I think we'll be returning to those. But let's go to Paolo. You set us up for our next set of questions, which is, now that we've looked at who's participated, let's get to this question of what did participants actually think value management, value propositions, and value selling are. So first, the definition of value management. And here the answers were orange, identifying and articulating differentiation in planning and training. Green, the discipline of articulating and incorporating value messages in commercial process. And blue, quantifying and communicating quantified value of your solutions and offerings. So a range of answers here. And what's interesting is marketing and customer success professionals tended to look at value management as a training and planning process. Product pricing and sales weighed in more heavily on the side of value management as a commercial practice, even if they emphasized qualitative and messaging elements there. And general management's all in. General management is saying value management is about quantifying and communicating. Todd, any reactions?
I think it's interesting because it just shows you everyone's got a different perspective. But from a general management perspective, you can't get paid for it and do number 3 if you don't do the other 2. And I think it was, Paolo saying, it's not marketing throwing it over the wall to sales and over the wall to product management and everybody blaming the other person of why value is not getting paid. General management saying it's a discipline across our total organization, and we need to look at it that way for us to truly make it happen.
Great.
They're getting it.
Yeah. So second and related questions about content, which is what actually is a value proposition? And the range of answers here is from qualitative messages about differentiation, that's the orange one, to a stronger quantitative approach, the value calculator approach in green, to an integrated story that includes both qualitative and quantitative elements in blue. And again, marketing and customer success are at the qualitative end of this spectrum in their answers. It's interesting that sales emphasizes the calculator element, while general management is thinking about this as an integrated story. Iacob, what's your view?
Well, interesting findings. I would say that, first of all, if we define value a little bit different from what Warren Buffett did and say that value is the financial benefit the customer gets in excess of the price they pay for a solution, then numbers, like sales says, must be a part of it. To me, a value proposition is a sales tool that communicates your product's unique benefits or differentiation, as you mentioned, Peyton. But if you look at the 3 alternatives that you put up, there's a value story, there's a value calculator, and there's a value statement. To me, there's a clear difference between these words and where the story stands out from pure numbers. And as such, using a definition of a value calculator doesn't define what a value proposition is all about. Still, numbers must be a part of a value proposition. I would say that, and bear in mind that sales normally focus on gross sales and gross margins per se. So often bonus plans are a part of these factors. But I'm not surprised to see that management define a value proposition by the word persuasive as listed in the upper sentence. And in that context, it's not only the financial economic impact, it's also the intangibles that would be defined as such.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We actually have a client who had been calling their value proposition a value calculator, and then they realized they had to actually call it something to their customers. And they said, oh, we can't call it a value calculator. And so it's very interesting. It's, this is very much about the outcomes we deliver, the overall context. Next version, again, related, but this is more directly about value selling. And again, the answers include qualitative in orange, strongly quantitative, the calculator approach in green, and the integrated qualitative and quantitative approach in blue. In this one, clearly general management comes down hard on the side of it being story with math. Product pricing and sales mostly believe that math should be an element here. whereas customer success and marketing are more qualitative. Paolo, how do members of your organization perceive value selling? Messages, math, integrated story.
I believe it's actually a mix of all the three components you mentioned here. And if I go back also to the previous slide, what Ole Iacob was saying is, in my opinion, very correct. But at the end, isn't like an evolution of our organization go through the journey, that you start with a simple statement, a value proposition. And I challenge my colleagues sometimes saying, this may be a little bit marketing blah blah, right? Everybody can say we're more sustainable than the rest. Then move into a quantification of what this statement is about, which makes already the difference, because you can prove that your customer is making more money with you than with the next best alternative. To then build the full value story, which is also the part of communications, that's also very, very important. And so back to your question, Peyton, I think it's really a mix, at least what we are using at Borealis, it's a mix of these three components. Sometimes we focus more on the qualitative statements, sometimes we bring more the numbers, but ideally, value proposition should be a short, clear statement, ideally, as Ole Iacob said, with some sort of quantification, because it's about why your customers are buying from you or should buy from you, and how much more money they make at the end of the day. If you can approve this, then again, you are back to marketing blah blah, and everybody can do that, right?
Yeah, no, great point. And we got some answers who said, well, it's all of the above, and I think that's a good perspective. And having options is a good thing too. So with that in mind, let's shift a little bit from what to when. And we'll start with when in the product life cycle our participants use value management as a discipline. So here's the overall perspective across the life cycle. And so looking at these kind of graphs, focus your attention on the blue bars. Those are frequently and always. And here we see answers across the board from early in the development, which are the two columns on the left. That's thinking about spending development money and understanding value as part of gate reviews. Product launch are the middle two columns. So that's really about setting prices and coming up with better go-to-market strategies and even coming up with launch collateral. Then the fifth column here is about using it for existing products, where we asked about and finally we looked at monitoring success. And so what you're seeing, even in monitoring success, over half the participants said that they monitor success frequently or always. So there's a lot of answers here, and I think it's best to understand these if we drill down a little better one at a time. First, let's look at value disciplines and product development by vertical. So this happens to be the gate review question, but the other development question was similar in its results. And if we look at these across verticals, what we're seeing is healthcare is the clear leader in looking at value as they develop products, almost 80% frequently or always. Whereas in the development stage, logistics is kind of the other end of the spectrum, less than 45% frequently or always, with software, manufacturing, chemicals, somewhere in between. So Todd, any thoughts about product development? Who should embed good disciplines, and where some of these differences come from?
I think with the healthcare and medical world, the cost of failure is so high. If you were to build a CAT scan machine, I mean, that's one. Number two, because of the payment model in some of the markets, insurance, they're going to pay for quantified value, not a brand or a feeling or something. So to sell something into that world, you better have a business case. So I think over time they've learned they have to do it. I come from the manufacturing world. I'm amazed to see 50%. Maybe things have changed since I've left to be a consultant, because that's great news that they're doing it that often, frequently and always. And I think, you know, the value management office, whatever that team person's called, to be that customer perspective, to embed those systems processes along the way. And what we eventually did was support the product development people, pricing people, etc., but also be that view from the customer. ask the dumb, like, so what? What does that work?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, not because too often there should be level 6. We've launched it and then we come back to the value team and say, you know, can you go back and fix this? It's really tough after launch that you spent all this money on to come back and say, now we're going to reposition it. We don't have the data. So again, learning, have somebody make it part of their job, have them there to support, but also be the challenger,
Yeah.
the value person, whoever that's called. Good.
Let's keep going on when, and now we get into product launch, where again, we did it by verticals. What's interesting is chemicals, oil and gas are now sort of highlighting greater importance at that stage, you know, along with healthcare, clearly. Paolo, with your chemicals industry experience, how do you use value in the product launch process, and why is it important?
I mean, value when launching a new product is very, very important for us, because as Todd just said, you need to get first time right? If you launch a product and you don't do your value assessments and you are not able to understand why customers should buy this new solution, then you're not starting well, right? So we have a formal process, Borealis. Whenever you launch a new product, you need to go through a value assessment with LeveragePoint. And if you are not able to produce a simple proof that you use LeveragePoint and how much more money our customers are supposed to make with this new solution, you simply cannot go forward. And I think it's a pretty simple but effective way to embed customer value management in our existing commercial processes that so far has been pretty successful, I must say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thanks. So now we look at product management for existing products. So using value in existing product management is really more of a mixed bag, I think, across the verticals. Iacob, in your experience, when is it important and when do you focus on quantifying value for existing products and why?
Well, first of all, for all the differentiated products where there's a clear benefit from the customer side, it is imperative to quantify value. It might not be straightforward, but even if you haven't done an analysis or a value model, it has been done in the past for these existing products. Use the case studies that you have, quantify them or dollarize them, as someone would call it, and make a value model. Use the best available numbers you got at hand. My experience is that this will trigger the mindset of everyone in the organization. When you look at differentiation as compared to product cost for production cost for products, regular updates on these models will allow you for a broader understanding of the overall benefits of these products as well. Where you have specific differentiated features, that's a no-brainer. Where you don't have them, like let's say traded products, I hate to use the word commodity products, but let's use it in this case. My recommendation is to find the intangibles that the organization can contribute to and make them tangible. In other words, you can use lab services you might have, speed of delivery, and etc. Even trust factor and reliability of your own company. You use that and you trigger the value drivers that you need in order to put up let's say commodity product into a specialty category.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about the offering more than it's about the product.
Correct.
And Peyton, I'm sorry to jump in. If I may build on this, I think this point is very, very important, and I'd like to stress this in our panel today, because very, very often we are struggling with this concept of commodity, right? We cannot find any element of differentiation with our products, but we have to continue repeating that the concept of commodity is a self-created concept that comes from laziness of not taking the time to look at every single differential elements of your value proposition. The intangible elements that Iacob just mentioned is a simple but very important element and example. We have to keep on repeating in the organization that the intangible are as important as the product-related features, because many organizations have been investing a lot on technical service, customer service, brand as such. And it's not impossible to quantify these elements. Maybe it's more difficult. Maybe it is very difficult in some cases. Maybe we fear when going to customers to talk about these elements because we fear reactions. But it's very, very important to spend time on this because that's where sometimes companies really are differentiating themselves from others and should really keep on repeating this in our organizations.
Yeah, if you perceive yourself as a commodity, you're doomed to realize a commodity price.
Very quickly, from my side, just very quickly here. What I like to say is, if you can find any differentiation in the product, look at what differentiates from the service side. There's a reason why companies buy from your company.
Yeah.
And find it and use it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's turn to this question of tracking success, and it's interesting. Tracking success here. Once again, I think we're seeing some trends, most important in healthcare and chemicals, maybe least important in logistics. But Paolo, let's ask you the very direct question. How do you measure success?
Before answering the question, Peyton, it's very, very important to measure success. Again, simple thing. But if we fail in this, again, we may give them the impression organization we are all about introducing nice, cool strategic initiatives. If we cannot prove that this is delivering money for our customers and as a consequence for our companies, and it's again a nice exercise, but nothing concrete. So how do we measure success? At least my experience. Also in this case, like in customer value management, it's always about so relative to a next best alternative, right? So what we simply implemented is for existing business, we do a peer comparison analysis. So we compare those customers, the performance, volume, price, or margins of those customers we visited with these methodologies versus similar customers in the same region that in the same period we sold the same products, right? That we didn't visit, and then we measure the impact, and we were able to measure a pretty interesting outcome when we first did this. But for new products instead, the next best alternative is asking your marketing manager at which price he or she would set the solution before going through a customer value management exercise. Then after you do the quantification, you compare. And very often you find more value and a higher target price based on this exercise. And if you wish, also internally, that's a royalty from your contribution as a customer value management practitioner, because without these methodologies, you would have set as an organization a lower target price. And that's how we measure success or these initiatives.
Oh, great. Thanks. Well, we touched on when from the standpoint of value management. Let's turn to the when question with more of a focus on customer interaction in the sales process. So when in the buyer's journey do you use value? And this question, very interesting across the board. 34% tend to use it very early in call prep, in preparing and planning customer conversations. 50% in engaging decision makers, and people could answer more than one here. 38% in negotiation, and only 18% answered post-sale and with existing accounts. It's an interesting result, and I was expecting a heavier emphasis on negotiations. Iacob, and any thoughts about holding the value conversation in reserve until the end of the sales cycle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm pleased to see that the value is being deployed at the early stage of the sales process when products are being introduced to customers and as a preparation to sales presentations. I'm a little bit surprised that the number is not higher, but the earlier in a customer conversation value can be deployed, the less likelihood, in my mind and my experience, for the discounts to happen. What is a little bit surprising is the low number on the review process, review success and opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, success stories like case studies It's a great way of elaborating the true financial benefit of a product or service, especially when the customer unit of measure, where they use the same KPIs, is the same for different customers.
Yeah. So to Ole Iacob's point, Paolo, it seems like using value for existing relationships and account management sort of got the lowest yes score here. What are your thoughts about using value with existing accounts?
Well, honestly, that doesn't surprise me so much because if you think about back to what Todd was saying before when launching new solutions, it's easier to implement these concepts when a product or a solution or is not in the market or when you visit a new customer. With existing business, as at least my experience, it's always a little bit more difficult, right? Because if you learn that you should have priced higher, it's very difficult to go back to existing customers and saying, by the way, I've been treating you too well for many years. Now I need to increase my prices based on this. It's very, very difficult to have this type of conversations. And one last point on negotiation, what we typically recommend is not to have conversations around value at the same time of volume or price negotiations. First of all, because when you are in negotiation, your mindset is all about getting the best deal. But customer value management and value conversations are not about getting the best deal transaction. They are about getting the best deal in a lifetime. Right? So you need to create different venues to discuss about value. Often you need to have different people around the table than the ones that you typically have when negotiating your prices or your contracts. So I would recommend to keep these two moments separate rather than using it. Of course, if you have already invested in the years in communicating your value proposition, then as a consequence, when negotiating, then your sales force should be more comfortable and confident in selling on value and defending more the current price levels. But it should not be the reason why, right? You build this.
Yeah, it's Todd's book, isn't it? It's value first, then price.
Absolutely. Read it many times, by the way. Very interesting. Recommended.
So here we see a little bit more about using value and sales process by vertical, where we included consultants as a vertical here because their scores were sort of off the charts. It's interesting that manufacturing respondents are actually the most focused on using value in existing account management, which, I'll be the first to say surprised me. And of course, the consultants think you should use it all the way through. But Todd, do some of these results resonate with you, surprise you? What are your reactions?
A few things. One, I hate to say, I think for your bigger customers, not just your key accounts, but not the transactional maybe, but for the ones you have an ongoing relationship, it has to be 100% across the board because it's great to do the call prep and the PowerPoints. That's fun, but then when you get to the executive buyer and then you show up and throw up, as they say, and can't be specific to the industry, engage them based on their world, it's worthless. I think Paolo's discussion about keeping the price negotiation, I think it makes sense. Maybe just from my experience in my world, we had that all together. And my job was to say, best value is better than lowest price, but that value is quantifiable and we're going to measure it, which leads to number 4, tracking what actually happens. And for those of you that have watched me on LeveragePoint before, I do 20% of my work with procurement. And good or bad, as a ex-salesperson, I tell them to put fee at risk. And in my old world with industrial companies, instead of a 10% price discount during negotiation, I'm going to guarantee you value. We have to agree on what value is, energy savers, labor, inventory. And if I don't, I'm going to write you a check. What I find is the people that aren't tracking it, this customer success in the software world, you're giving them a reason to change. So in the 200 global agreements that we have where value was engaged, part of the negotiation, but was part of the tracking and what actually happened, the success was just phenomenal. So everybody, I think this is, again, going back to why you need a value management team, whatever you want to call it, because it needs to look holistically. Because I've seen a lot of companies that are great in the PowerPoint version of it, and then sales goes, this is great. Can we deliver this? Is it quantifiable? And then people, I hate to say, with some training, they get in front of the decision makers, and the decision maker challenges them. They go, I don't know, the PowerPoint slide says so. I'm not comfortable with the numbers or the calculations. Or you get into negotiations, you do, here's all this great value, but here's a 10% price discount. I think you need to have a value and price negotiation that says, I will deliver more value, but I want to get paid for it. And that, again, value, but I'm going to get paid for it, not hope. I could go on too long there, Peyton, so we'll move along.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Todd. So here we see the value selling by responses by role and function. So the product managers, orange, seem to be at the low end of the spectrum in using value in the sales process. They see it as a late in the sales cycle approach as well, where general management, which is that middle blue, not the dark blue color, it's the lightest blue, has the strongest belief that their organizations use value all the way through. Paolo, and any thoughts about who in the organization should be involved in driving value in sales?
So on one hand, I'm with Todd that if you have say, value management team driving these processes could be beneficial. And we have indeed that. For example, when we visit customers with our value workshops, I am the one facilitating these value workshops. I'm more neutral to the parties. And even if marketing and sales and technical colleagues are in the meeting, I typically facilitate this workshop. This gives a better atmosphere to the meeting, and it's being recognized as a value from my colleagues. So that's the first part of the question.
What if you don't have a value office?
And then actually this links very well with the second part of the question. Mm-hmm. Then you need to create a certain culture in the company where eventually everybody owns this concept. And I know it's difficult at the beginning, but if you think about it, I'm pretty strict with this. Your value proposition is ultimately the reason why your customers are buying from you. And if you wish, ultimately the reason why your company exists, right? So it's not about having, it was until end of last month, I had a commercial excellence for Borealis. It's not about only having commercial excellence initiatives on this. It's really to have, as I mentioned at the beginning, people involved at the beginning. So it's sales, it's marketing, it's technical service. We have customer service involved in this. We have a supply chain more and more running this quantification exercise. And the more they feel they are part of the value proposition and they're contributing, concretely to the value proposition, the easier it is to implement these concepts, right? Yeah. So again, value proposition should not be, a marketing topic, very high level for the sake of having a process around it. Should really be the ultimate reason why customers are buying from us. They should be able to clearly explain this. So if you don't have somebody dedicated to this, you should look at least internally, somebody in the headquarters who is able to connect the dots, as Todd said, and create this culture. I would really recommend to have somebody.
Yeah, it's champions. Yeah. Great. So let's continue on the value selling theme, but shift a little bit from when to how, and look just briefly at prevailing practices and our teams aligned. So we had a range of questions here. Are sales reps equipped to sell value? Is value content aligned with sales methodology and process? Is sales training customer value centric? Are actual conversations that salespeople have centered on customer value, or are they product centric? And do you measure sales success? Those are the 5 questions represented here. And I think you'll see these responses are consistent with the overall assessment. Our respondents tend to believe that their organizations sell value effectively for the most part, at least some of the time, maybe not frequently or always. If you drill down by role and look at our reps equipped with good value propositions, again, look at the blue. Because what we're seeing again, marketing and customer success, and remember, they're the most qualitative types in their answers, believe sales teams are well supported with value propositions. And those may be more qualitative value propositions, where pricing and product management may be a little less convinced. Sales and general management somewhere in the middle. Todd, who should be responsible for equipping sales with value props?
It's got to come via marketing, but I think the product expert needs to do it. And I think, again, you set it up perfectly. I mean, marketing says, oh, it's all value proposition. It's qualitative. It's not quantitative because they say they can't or they won't or it's impossible. But again, whoever that person is, whatever their title is, to challenge what that value proposition that gets to the market. And one of my favorite ones is, here's a value proposition. We're a 100-year-old company and we're based in Europe. That's not a value proposition. Oh, right. By the way, maybe 20% more because of that. And again, have a salesperson sit on that product launch at those stage gates and say, my customer's not going to pay more for that. Or if they're going to pay more, it'll be 0.001%. Not, you don't expect me 30%. So it doesn't need to be the value person if you don't have an office, but it's that team approach. It's got to go through one person eventually.
Yeah.
But,
Great. Yep. So let's keep going with some results. Are reps equipped with good value props? Asking the question by job level. Focus again on the blue. Once again, senior management on the left thinks that their organizations are doing a better job in equipping sales with value props than the mid-level managements and contributors on the right. So echoes an earlier theme. Here's the alignment question. Looking at the blue again, customer success, marketing, general management are most confident in their organizational alignment. Product managers may be the most skeptical. So some interesting overall perspectives on how teams think they're doing on specific deliverables. But as we wanted to think about the how question, fortunately, we were able to kind of broaden out our discussion because we asked respondents for specific answers on how they think they can improve performance. So I'm going to get to the how question really based on specific answers rather than some of the polling questions. So we got a whole lot of answers, and with that many respondents, there are bound to be a number of them. So we thought about bucketing their answers in terms of 5 categories: leadership, organization, process, content, and resources. And as I say, lots of very specific answers here. We're going to take each of these categories in turn and get the conversation going. So first, leadership, where what we're seeing is we need support. Upper management's needed. We need to work hard, persistence. Don't boil the ocean. Balance timing with perfection. Get feedback. So a lot of answers here. Iacob, what advice would you give a chief marketing officer or a chief sales officer on how to make value management and value selling effective as a leader?
So now we're talking about the C-suite, and if there are a few things. First of all, engagement and training of the entire organization. Basically, what Paolo said a couple of minutes ago, and I would put emphasis on success stories throughout the entire organization and spread the good news. Repeat this continuously. Also ensure that the CMO and CSO that they put the word value management and broadcast this into every meeting that they have. Every department should understand and appreciate the mindset of value management and don't fall back to the business as usual. where cost plus and markups are utilized. The reason is that value management is not a task that should be done on every now and then. It's a mindset that needs to be a part of the organization's DNA.
Yeah, some of the best organizations I've seen, the CEO routinely talks about it on earnings calls.
Yes.
So let's shift a little bit to organization, where again we got interesting perspectives, involve the sales team, align efforts, think about job requirements and defining them, decentralized decision making. Todd, as you look at organization questions, what are the three most important pieces of advice you would have for organizations looking to improve?
Back to your earlier comment, I mean, I was very lucky at the company I was with, SKF, for 20 something years. Our CEO talked about it on stage. I was at a lot of the shareholder events. It was in our annual report, value created, quantify. I mean, this is our reason to exist. This is what we do better. So, I mean, but he bought into it because it was more than a flavor of the month. So organization, and again, all I can do is look from a big global organization, but if in any program we did, if there wasn't a person that owned it and it wasn't full-time, it died. And I'm not just talking with the value management stuff, but Six Sigma, same thing. 10 years, lots of money invested. Finally, they said to a gentleman, full-time job. I wouldn't say immediate, but there's the pushback from sales. Flavor of the month. It got boring. It got stale. There's nobody to call. I'm not an expert. And I'll tell you, I would never go to an industry or an application or a customer without an expert. I need to know who to call to say, hey. So organizations need to have this group that goes across the whole company. Sales still owns sales. Pricing still owns pricing. Somebody's a resource, it's constant and it's got to be updated, and management's got to believe in it. And again, that's just what I've seen. That one person face makes all the difference.
Focus. Yep. Great point. Great point. Great point. So now we get to the process answers, monitoring, measuring success. I think they anticipated some of your points earlier, Paolo. Parties, community events, promotion activities, prizes, embed in your day-to-day management process. Paolo, what do you think is most important in a good value process?
First of all, I think that the comments the participants shared here are already very valuable because we have measuring results, we have celebrating success and promoting internally success, which is also very important in the process. We have making sure that customer value management is part of our key commercial processes, key account management there, strategic account management is an example. So we have already many interesting elements here. Thank you for this. One thing that comes to my mind, maybe again, going back to the basics about this question is to have a process. We take it for granted, but like a pricing process, if you don't have clearly in the organization a definition of the steps of a customer value management process and clearly understanding who's taking care of what, a little bit back to what Todd was saying about focusing, it's much more difficult, right? So maybe that's also an additional contribution to what the participants already shared.
Okay, I want to get through our kind of final pieces here, just briefly on content. And here you see a lot of perspectives, emphasize the customer perspective, segment, that seemed to come out as very important in content design. Be convincing. Iacob, 2 sentences. What's most important to you in a good value proposition?
It's the customer outcome. What are they trying to achieve? What are they looking for? What are their KPIs? If you need to, when you're building a good story, you need to be trustworthy. Unless you have a great deal of trust with the numbers that you present, you can forget about it. They have to be conservative, so they need to resonate with the customer. Unless they do so, they will kill you. And second, just very quickly at the end, remember to include all negative value drivers, if any. Yeah. If you don't do that, then you won't get a sale.
Yeah. Todd, your 2 or 3 thoughts. What would you add?
Just to make a quick one, one thing that I found is, the sales team needs to role play these things against the buyer, because too often we've done a training, marketing, here are the slides, and they get in front of that C-level person and they don't have that story, they don't have that passion, they don't have that belief, and it's just reading. And somebody said to me years ago, it's the passion of the person that's presenting the value, which is as important or more than the formula. Because in some industries, everybody's got a value quantification, what if statement. And so, the check back was, let's challenge it. And, when people really believe it and they can tell their own stories, it adds so much more credibility.
Yep. So last resources, a lot of interesting comments here. Training, tools. Paolo, if you were formulating a plan to drive a good process, what would be your top 2 or 3 requests?
Here I would say, first of all, get a diagnostic on your price maturity level. Many companies start value-based pricing and customer value management being a level 1 or 2. They don't realize they need to fix transactional pricing first. And that's very important, because that's where companies fail. Second, tools. Start with Excel, good enough, but then you need to get more professional and use better tools. And third, back to what Todd was saying, focus. Invest in at least 1 FTE who drives this. It's really worth the investment. The return on investment is higher.
Well, this is a great conversation. We could keep going, I'm sure, for quite a while. But finally, in terms of respondents, here are 2 responses to the how we can get better question. First one, pretty practical. Whoever helps the company solve the problem will be promoted and paid more. Incentivization and leadership go together. Solves the problem. Second quote of the survey, we should be fully incorporating customer value at every stage of our journey. That's a vision that drives success. It takes effort. So thank you to our respondents, and a special thanks to our panelists. Nick.
Yes, Peyton, thank you. And again, thanks to the panel. It's always great to see the value community come together for an event like this. And this was a lot of fun. So looking forward to something like this again in the future. So I think we're probably out of time to go deep into a Q&A. So if it's okay with the panel, we can collect the questions at some point next week and circulate them potentially in the form of a blog post follow-up. So everyone in the audience can see what the answers were. We had a few good ones. So moving on to what some people might be waiting for is the gift card winners. We'd like to announce the winners of the $300 Amazon gift cards that are randomly drawn from a pool of survey participants. So congrats to Marco, Sweeb, and Chad. And we'll be following up with you directly. Lastly, today's session will conclude the 2022 LeveragePoint webinar series, but real quick before you go, a reminder that you can pre-register for the slate of Q1 2023. Yes, it's already upon us. Our monthly webinar series by filling out in the exit survey. We're gonna be covering a number of timely topics, including new and exciting ways that interactive value propositions can be deployed across the customer journey from the earliest customer touch points. Also in the survey, you'll have a chance to suggest questions for next year's version of the survey. So just take a minute and fill it out upon exiting. So that's it from us today. So thank you all for taking the time for joining us. A big thank you to our panel, Paolo, Iacob, and Todd, for taking the time to share your important insights, and Peyton for taking the time to moderate the session today. So for all of us here at LeveragePoint, have a wonderful rest of your 2022, and here's to a great 2023. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.